And when I started squeezing the trigger, the gun just went straight up. I mean, it just pulled stuff up, and it's pushing me back, and they're having to hold me up so that I don't fall back. So can you imagine that being in the hands of some of our young people that think they can shoot a weapon sideways because they saw it on No. And that's what you're seeing, and that's why we got so many, when they say mass destruction, this is all about killing. It ain't about safety. It ain't got crap to do with the Second Amendment. This is all about causing mass destruction.
All righty, kiddos. Welcome in. Another fantastic week of your favorite political podcast. It's Alabama Politics This Week with Josh Moon and
David Person.
All right, David, before we get rolling solidly with the politics of this thing, or maybe this is actually a little bit of politics as well, I guess. I need to tell you about our friends that sponsor this thing, the folks at Wind Creek and the Porch Band of Creek Indians, and went down and had a little visit with those good folks and did a very formal tour of things and got a tour around town with Keith Martin and around the reservation with Keith Martin, who is I've never met somebody who had more of a grasp of their people's history than Keith. He is was just the best, man. He was great. Just we rode around in his truck for 2 days basically, and he took me and introduced me to roughly 78,000 people. And what they have. And I've told them this, and so it's when it comes as a surprise is just really a remarkable little community. And I'll tell you now, I'll tell people that I'm going to write here in the very near future. I've already started writing it as to basically a column saying I've seen what Alabama could be if we acted the way we pretend that we want to be, because it's a community that has prospered over the course of the last several years. And they've come from very poor, obviously, oppressed group of people that had their land stolen from them, were displaced and pushed around all over the place, and they have managed through utilizing the laws and legal structure that was there and available to them. They have managed to uplift themselves into this bit of wealth and stuff, and they have taken the wealth and they have taken care of their people within their community, and they've shared it outside of that community as well. But they have taken care of their folks. I toured the senior living center there, where all the tribal members are eligible to stay once they reach an elderly age. It's like nothing I've ever seen. And my wife is in that industry. I was sending her pictures, and she was just amazed of the rooms. They've got at this place. They've got a 50s style diner there that the residents can go to and eat in. They've got just the activities thing they've got a clinic, a health clinic where they go for dental and vision and health things. All the tribal members are eligible for this. All of it is at no cost. Prescriptions are mostly at no cost. That they do have to carry insurance before referrals out to specialists and whatnot. But all the rest of it is covered. That's what they've been able to. And it's a state of the art facility with. You walk into the eye care center, and it's like walking into your normal eye care center. This is not some scaled down, scaled back version of these things. They have the drug treatment and addiction center. They have one of the most amazing pre-K things that I've ever seen in my life. And recreation center where they go and get 400 kids every day from surrounding areas, from 4 different counties and 2 different states. bus them to that for the participating schools, bus them to the recreation center and have them there for after school care
Two different
and
states?
programs. Yes, Florida and Alabama. Because they're right there on the line in Florida, right there next to Florida, and so I mean, and all the facilities, the water treatment, the internet networks, the things of that nature. It was just a really eye opening experience to see what they've done to kind of take care of everybody with the money that they have. And the money that they have is no more money than what we have. I mean, we've got plenty of money in this state. It's all in turn, I guess it's defined by what's important to you. And what's important to a lot of people in this state is making sure that the wealthiest remain the wealthiest. And, what's important to them has been taking care of all their people. And that shows, the value of other humans is reflected, that you hold is reflected in how you treat them. And that has never been more evident than what you saw down there. And listen, I understand they've made money on, through electronic, gambling lately and through bingo and other things. It's legal. It's as every bit as legal as the things that we've used. And I will say, far more ethical and moral than the way a lot of people in this state made their money in their family. Whether it be through slavery or, the theft of land or whatever else has gone on. So,
and there's a lot of that has gone on in the history of this state and the history of this nation. This nation was built that way. The whole nation really was built on the backs of the indigenous people and African slaves and then other immigrants. But as I was listening to you talk, not to go too far down the road with this, but what I heard you describing is a model of society that is based very much on being altruistic and charitable, and it reminded me to some degree, and I'm not saying this is an exact parallel by any standard. Nor am I trying to conflate the two, but it reminds me of another societal model that I think many of us in this nation have forgotten about or have been ignorant of, and that was the Old Testament model. Now, and I bring this up only because, this part of the country is such a Bible thumping part of the country, right?
Right.
But there was, and anybody who knows me knows I am absolutely not advocating for a so-called theocracy. Absolutely not.
Right.
But there were considerations made in Old Testament social mores for the poor. And that's really what I'm getting to. You talk about a society where there were built-in provisions to make sure that some of the poorer people there were mechanisms by which they could get some care and some benefit that were built into the Mosaic laws. And so when I look at what we've done in this capitalist society, especially again, because we claim to be so Christian and claim to be so biblical, we're really not. But it sounds like to me what you're describing with what you saw there on the Porch Creek Reservation was something that was a lot more charitable, dare I say, in some ways biblical, than what we practice in this so-called Bible Belt state.
Yeah, I would say that's very true. And the other thing that I'd never really, I guess I never really thought about it honestly. Was it's a very faith-based kind of community. They're really big in Christianity there, and I honestly, I never kind of considered what, religious practices would take place with a Native American tribe or with Native American people. And, because you see a lot of the stuff that's portrayed on the TV and movies and things like that, where it's, it's this spirit world type thing or whatever. And, and in talking to some of them, they're, they say that stuff is there, but it's kind of meshed, I guess, would be the best way to, in some way, to with Christianity, and the two kind of overlap or work in tandem together with especially some of the older folks in the tribe. And but it's you're right, it is. There's a real sense of, we have to take care of each other. And, talking to Keith, who he's, was telling me stories about his family and stuff. And, he's talked about his grandmother's house. And it's like, he said, I remember very well sitting in my grandmother's living room in front of the fireplace, and you could look up. The fireplace was leaning back. The chimney was leaning back, and you could see the sky. There, you could see the ground through the floorboards there. He said, it's the coldest place I've ever lived in my life. And he's like, and he said, this has been in my life, so this kind of upward trajectory of us has occurred within my lifetime. And, and this is where we came from. And when you come from that level of poverty and struggle, then you learn this, hey, we got to take care of each other, because these folks next door are living in the same poverty as us. And if we've got to make sure that we're all okay here, because we're all in this same struggle. And they've kind of been able to hold on to that. And so, and it is, but at the same time, there's also, I think one of the things, people just kind of look at it as this luck or this advantage or whatever, that they were able to have the gaming stuff that they have. And that's true to a certain extent, but at the same time, they're very entrepreneurial. And they got a bunch of businesses. They run a bunch of businesses that I would say are starting to rival the income from the gambling stuff through federal contracts. They partner with the United States military on a bunch of different contracts in several different countries. They have different aviation contracts, different manufacturing contracts. It was a really neat experience, man, to kind of to look at them and get a kind of an inside view, and I'm going to write some stuff about it, and kind of, I think people have, I know, and I say this knowing full well that I was one of them. People have kind of an ignorant view of them. Because we've never really taken the time to kind of get to know who they are and what they do, and that we see them as just this group of people that are focused on this one thing. And I think that whenever you mention the Porch Creek Indians, it's always tied to gambling or something along those lines, and it's just not true. I mean, they got a hotel, they got a couple of different hotels up here in Huntsville. And
yeah, I was just going to say, we've talked about that before. I mean, their footprint up here when it comes to not just hotels, but even that Redstone Gateway, I think that's what it's called, is fairly significant. And I think what it shows is that, when people are given opportunities, they will thrive. I think that's just the human spirit. We are designed, I would say designed or created to be innovative, to be builders, to be, to pursue, development. And that's across the board. I don't care who you're talking about, Black, white, Indian, Christian, non-Christian, gay, straight, doesn't matter. I mean, we're just, as human beings, this is what we do. Given an opportunity.
Yep. Yeah. And listen, there was there's a little bit of courage that was involved, because I point out that there are tribes right now that have the same opportunities and are in similar situations that have not taken that step forward and not done this. And, I was talking to one of the guys there that's with Porch Creeks, and he was talking about this meeting that they had with a very high level executive from a very well known casino organization. And they sat in the room, and this person said, listen, this is never going to work. You can't build these facilities in Atmore and Wetumpka and offering only Class 2 gaming and expect that these things are going to be supported. It's never going to work. About 5 years later, he got a phone call from this guy who was then at that time now working freelance consulting on and getting people to invest in other properties and other casinos. And he called him, and the first thing he said was, all right, let's play. First things first, you were right and I was wrong. Okay, let's just get that out of the way right now. That's how this went. So you had people that were legitimately telling them, that knew the business, that knew what was going on. They were telling them, you can't do this. But man, that facility down there, we had a nice dinner at Fire. It was fire. It was, as the kids say, and it was a fantastic meal. Took a nice tour of the casino facility there. And, of course, the casino is the casino with the games and things. But they've also got the arcade and the movie theater and the bowling alley and the spa and the restaurants and all that. And it's just, honestly, listen, if you're looking for a nice vacation, it is top notch. It really is. That pool down there is really something to see. The rooms were fantastic. I had a really, really nice time with them, but really the most impressive thing was just kind of learning about them and learning, kind of the history and where they came from and what they've been able to accomplish, just really, being go-getters, man, and going and getting it. And that's something that I think we should value a little more. If it were a white dude, running a car manufacturing plant, man, we'd be celebrating them left and right. But it's here we are. All right, but and we thank them, and look them up online, Wind Creek Entertainment, and book a stay at one of the facilities around, and you will not regret it. I'm telling you, you won't regret it. All right, let's get into this thing here a little bit. So we're going to have Montgomery County Sheriff Derek Cunningham on with us in a few minutes, but it's all about guns and the way a bunch of young people are using them, and because we had another mass shooting in this state. And by all accounts in Birmingham, the folks that did the shooting just hopped out of a car, were targeting one particular individual, and sprayed bullets into a crowd of people in an effort to kill one particular person. I think the local law enforcement had sort of described it as a hit or a targeted effort by this group, maybe for money, to try to kill one particular person. And I apparently that person was one of the victims that was killed, but in the process shot 21 people total, 4 of which died. And I don't think anyone else has passed away in the days since. I know there were some in very critical condition taken to the hospital. I read some accounts from people; they were horrific. I read one of a guy that had survived and was going to be fine, but he was just standing in line outside of Hush, which was a hookah bar and cigar lounge apparently, and run by a former police officer. And this guy, heard the commotion, heard the bullets start flying, and he took off running, took up several steps. And the next thing he knew, he said, I couldn't feel my leg. And he had been shot, and had a friend of his luckily came back and dragged him into a car and took him to the hospital, and said it was, he did not get a main artery, but he was bleeding pretty good. He said, and they saved him, and he was able to get to the hospital, and everything was going to be fine. But I just man, we're going to talk to Derek about. I think we have we have such a problem with firearms and our attitudes about firearms. It's reached the point of absolute absurdity. Absolute absurdity with the way that we treat guns and the way that people think about them and the way that we encourage everybody to carry them. But man, we got a hell of a problem too with just a lack of respect for life for some people. And people are going to be upset with me when I say this. All right. And I understand it, but you get respect when you give respect to people. And the lack of respect that we are seeing from so many people is because we have gone, in my opinion, it's because we have gone for so long disrespecting or just disregarding so many people, and especially so many young people who don't feel like anybody has ever given a damn about them. And when you grow up that way and you live with that anger from that every day and search for that love that they're not getting every day, this is the sort of thing that happens.
I don't care if you're talking about Italian immigrants in the the early part of the 19th century in Chicago, or whether you're talking about, young black people in, 2024. It's, a lot of it is the same. I mean, I grew up in Chicago. I know a little bit, not a whole lot, but a little bit about the history of organized crime in Chicago and other places. Mm-hmm. And it's all sort of the same. I mean, you have disenfranchised people who are ghettoized and who are impoverished, who are cheated out of opportunities by society. And then you have a crime element that comes and sort of fills the vacuum that is created by this sort of systemic poverty. And I know that may seem overly simplistic to some, but I think it's an accurate representation of what contributes to just what you're talking about, Josh. If we were more charitable as a society, if we focus more on opportunities, if we stopped, this taking this approach of creating economic hierarchies and really focused more on creating economic opportunities that were fair and equitable and just, then I think we would see, we see some differences in our country. But when you make people desperate, and when you cause them to not see their own value as they fend for themselves in their desperation, this is what happens.
Yeah. It's, man, it just, you're right. You're right. First of all, I mean, you can say it's simplistic, but oftentimes the simple answer, while there's going to be nuances and things that you can dissect and other avenues that you can get into among that simplistic explanation, the simplistic explanation is 100% right. You take 1,000-foot view of this thing, and it's what you said. It's when you have these neglected folks down, at the bottom of the ladder, there are going to be other people who were probably neglected themselves, who are going to come in and take advantage of those folks. They know what these people need. They need the acceptance. They need the love. They need the camaraderie. They need to feel a part of something. Everybody wants to feel a part of a family. All right. That's just the way that it is. It's not just humans, all throughout the entire animal kingdom. They want to be part of a family. And if you're not provided one, when through your normal family unit, you're going to search one out, and there are going to be people who provide it. And so our choices as a society have always been, are we going to be the ones that provide that family structure for them, or are we going to let these other folks take it? Because if we let those other folks take it, we know what's going to happen. I hate to sound like Nick Saban as I'm doing this, because I mean it honestly kind of sounds like a Nick Saban type rant that he would go, are we going to do this, or is this going to be somebody else that takes it up for us? Where do you want them to be? Where do you want him to be? And that's, but it's true. Listen, and I know the automatic response is, where are their parents? Why aren't their parents doing this? What's the matter with their parents? Look, that's true. Okay, that's true. Their parents should be doing this. All right, their parents should take control of this. Their parents should treat them the way my parents treated me. The way that we treat my daughter. We're helicoptering the hell out of this thing, and she's going to be. I'm hoping to ruin her for any person that comes along and tries to give her a better life. All right, that whoever comes along better be ready, because he's going to have a hell of a time. All right, and that's just all there is to it. But But if they're not, they're not. That's just the reality. If they're, and listen, I've gone through this. Man, I remember when we were doing this story one time about what was driving the uptick in murders in Montgomery. It's back when I worked at the Advertiser, when it was a real newspaper, and before that bro guy killed it, and drove me out unfairly.
Bitter?
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. No, I'm not bitter. I'm just laying down the facts. So like Tony Kornheiser with the guy Raju Narasetti gave him the buyout. I'm kind of the same way. I'm so but people will say, "Well, you took the buyout, you left." I'm like, "Yeah, but I didn't have to. You know what? I didn't have to." So. So we did this story, and I'll never forget, man. I will never forget going through the housing projects there. Okay, we would just go and walk through and just talk to people. And man, this was maybe, I want to say it was probably May when we went and did this, and just walking down the streets, and you see these kids. I mean, young kids that are just out roaming, and be like, "Hey man, where's your parents, bud?" And it was there. And, and often you would find out that, somebody was in jail, somebody had a drug problem. Somebody was living, the kids were living with grandma or with an aunt, and it was, and I say that to say this too, it doesn't matter the color of the skin. What matters is the economic stature of the folks. All right. Because you take those same things and we make that same stroll through a trailer park in North Limestone County, and we're going to run into the same stuff. Right. You're going to run into the same things up there, and those are going to be, little white kids running around up there, or or in some cases Hispanic kids, and that's how it is.
Well, yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, the drug problems and crime problems don't really know color. Any race of people, any ethnicity of people is susceptible to it. But here's where I think there is a distinction. When we evaluate the problem, we attribute this and when I say we, I mean society tends to attribute the problem when it comes to Black people. Society attributes it to Blackness. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When we're talking about Black people, when we're talking about white people, society doesn't attribute it to whiteness. Society attributes it to individuals who are not what they should be. You know, society doesn't paint with a broad brush when it comes to white people, but they do when it comes to Blacks and Hispanics and people that are non-white. And so that creates this, I think this really horrible, I would even argue, not just horrible, but false and evil sort of divide, and how we analyze these things. The other thing I would say is there has been, I think, historically, without question, there has been a targeting of certain groups of people by society by people with means. And this is an old playbook, but I think we can put it on the same continuum with what we've seen in this nation, and especially this part of the nation, meaning the southeast part of the nation, the old Confederacy part of the nation, for centuries, and that is a very intentional hierarchy was created where Black people, indigenous people, who of non-white ethnicities were always on the bottom. They were always the ones who were targeted by law and by social practice to be disenfranchised, and then economically and by law, white people who were maybe poor or working class were given just a few more opportunities, and a few more the ability to live a little bit better quality of life, and then you have the very wealthy who tended to be white, who lived off of and on top of all of everybody else. And I mean, we've seen this even with the Alabama Constitution. We can point to other things that are historic indicators of this. So this has been a part of our nation. And yes, there are anomalies. There have always been anomalies, and there always will be anomalies. But the reality is this is baked into how America has become America, and that's just the reality.
Yeah, you're right. And you know what? And we're going to we can explore that a little more when we get into the final segment here, because we're going to talk about a comparison between two candidates in the second congressional district, and a story that was written by Michael Harriet, and I've reached out. Maybe we can get Michael on to talk about this next week, and his story and his breakdown of the history of Caroline Dobson and her family, and how she managed to inherit this fifth generation cattle farm that they worked so hard for, and then compare and contrast that to the histories of the history of the Figures family, and what has taken place there. And it is a real. These are the American stories, okay. And when people talk about white privilege and things of that nature, this is some of the best. I guess maybe these are to the extremes in that comparison for a lot of people, but there's still a lot of this around, and so we can get into that. But we're gonna slide out now. We're gonna come back. We're gonna get Sheriff Derek Cunningham in and talk to him about the police perspective or law enforcement perspective on what's taking place with guns in this state, and what's kind of gone on in the last little bit with the shootings and the problems in Montgomery and the problems in Jefferson County as well. So we're gonna slide out. We'll be back in a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and man, we are happy now to have with us the sheriff in Montgomery County, Derek Cunningham. He used to chase me around when I was down there. He threatened to arrest me many times, and that's usually how we became friends. And because I learned to shape up if Derek Cunningham was around. Sheriff, how are you?
Man, it's good, Josh. Good to be here with you.
All righty. Hey, listen, we wanted to get you on because we saw what happened in Birmingham last week. We've seen some problems in Montgomery of a similar nature, and I guess we want to just kind of get a law enforcement standpoint on this, and y'all's view on a couple of different aspects. One of the things I think a big talking point now, and I don't say talking point because I think that reduces the seriousness of it a little bit, but one thing a lot of people are talking about are the Glock switches and bump stocks and things that are being done now to weapons to make them essentially turn into automatic weapons. So folks like in Birmingham can step out of a car and start firing, and they fire hundreds of rounds in a very short period of time. So from a law enforcement standpoint, when y'all talk about this, that these switches and things like that, what would you like to see happen with those?
Well, the thing is, Josh, that they're legal on the federal side, but they're on the state side. So when we catch somebody with a switch, the federal process is that you don't go down to a magistrate, sign a warrant, and put them in jail. You got to go through an indictment type process where the case has to be indicted, where it has to go before a federal grand jury and blah, blah, blah. And by the time that you get that indictment out, you're looking at months, sometime probably a year. So that's a long, tedious process in order to be able to get that person put in jail for possession of that switch or that device. So what we're looking at is in Alabama, at least being able to give us a law so that if we catch a person with one of these devices on their weapon, we can go ahead and make an arrest right then, sign a warrant, and put that person in jail. Because the ultimate goal. The people out in the communities, when they see us pull up and we get somebody that's probably fired off one of these machine guns, and the only thing that we got is shooting in the city limits. If they're in the city limits, out in the county, it ain't against the law. And then the only thing we can do is seize a weapon and then go through the process of being able to put them in jail or get them indicted federally if they meet the criteria. So we want to change that. We want to have a statute that says once we catch you in possession of one of these devices, you're going to jail. And not only do you go to jail, we just want to make sure that the consequences fit what they're dealing with. I don't want to just have a charge with no consequence. So we got to make sure we got a consequence on that. And to be perfectly honest with you, we're just talking about in Alabama, you got to have that device on the weapon. Federally, if you're in possession of the device, that you're in violation of the law. And I wouldn't mind seeing us do that, but I know that's going to be probably a hard pill to swallow with the legislature. So sometimes you got to take something to be able to get something so that the community know that we're at least trying to prevent these mass shootings and this stuff that you're starting to see to stop.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing that you have to say, well, that's, that stopping this thing from turning, from people possessing this item that turns an ordinary firearm into a weapon of mass destruction. Essentially, we can't get our legislature to take action on that. It's just amazing to actually say out loud. But the other thing that you hear a whole lot, you heard this in Montgomery a lot, is we're just not locking up enough people. We're being too lenient on crime. We're being too lenient on criminals. And we had Daryl Bailey on, a few weeks back, and he said, there was some truth to the fact that we've let some people out that didn't need to be out, and we've given judges a little more discretion in that area as time has gone on. But at the same time, I don't feel like necessarily locking up more folks is the answer. And so I guess I'm interested to know your perspective as a sheriff and out there on the streets all the time. What do you think is the answer, I guess?
Well, I think people tend to do what the consequences pretty much outline. If you're caught back in the day, if you got caught with a weapon and you didn't have a permit, you're going to jail. So now in today's times, if you're caught with a weapon, there's no consequences. Right now, with with permitless carry, you can walk down the street, like I tell people, buck naked, and I'm gonna charge you with that indecent exposure and not for possessing a firearm if you don't have any of those prior convictions, which outline and say that you're a person that shouldn't be in possession of a firearm. So I'm you for being naked and not for possession of a firearm. And that firearm has no consequences to it, and that's where we gotta stop that, and we gotta let. Right now, people are not scared. They walk around with their guns stuck out so you can see it. You can go to Walmart. You can be at the gas station and just look at people getting out of their cars with guns stuck in their pants, and they're pumping gas. But back in the day, you never seen people do that. And so now this is, we don't have any consequences. People are not scared to brandish a weapon and things of this nature. And that's why we got so many shootings, because that's the first thing that people turn to during anger or during any event. They're going to pull out that weapon and say, "Hey, look, you're going to get back, or we're going to do this." And that's what we're starting to see. But how can you stop it without a consequence?
Sheriff, I'd like to, and I understand that you're the sheriff in Montgomery County, not in Jefferson County, but I'd like for you to draw on your law enforcement experience and maybe flesh out some things for us, without being too speculative here. But my first question is, some reports are suggesting that this was a hit. What happened in Jefferson County was a hit. If that is indeed true, is that really reflective of a problem of a large scale problem, or would that not be more of an isolated incident problem?
Well, I, I really hate to say that it's be more isolated due to the fact they use a switch, the possibility with the number of shell casings that were found, and and you shot into a crowd, or you shot into a building where a crowd was gathered at. So that you're you're looking at mass casualty, and so they had no. If it was a hit, an isolated thing, therefore they were coming to shoot this one person they were looking for. But this venue turned into a mass casualty. This is the same. What makes this any different than what took place in Dadeville when you had all of those people shot? And supposedly they came there and they saw the person they were looking for, but you had all of these people shot. You know, so I hate to say that it's an isolated, because they took away the isolation part when you sprayed into a group of people. So therefore, if you're using a switch, you can't control it. There's no. I shot one a couple of weeks ago at a demonstration that the ATF put on, and I shoot all the time, and I couldn't control it. They had to put their hand behind my back to brace me, and I didn't shoot for 29 rounds. So I know for a fact if I can't control it, and they know for a fact they can't control it, and you're shooting at one person with an uncontrollable weapon, I can't call that isolated. I can't get a grip on that. How can we loop it in as being isolated? So that's a mass casualty. What you did was reckless, and what you did, you knew that when you squeeze that round off, you're finna send however many rounds that are in that weapon down range or down into that direction of where you're trying to shoot at, and sight alignment and all that stuff wasn't there.
Hmm. All right. Another question I have, Sheriff, is, and I thank you for your thoroughness with that answer. Another question I have is about whether or not an effective case has been made to the legislature about the dangers of these particular devices, these bump stocks or these switches, as we call them. Are you aware of any quantitative qualitative studies that have been done that really look at the difference in impact on a community between one where these things are illegal and not accessible, and a community where they are.
Well, and let me help you on that now.
Okay, all right.
I don't want us to get bump stocks and Glock switches in the same realm, because these are two different devices, and that's one of the things that we got hung up at the legislature last year. We started talking about bump stocks. What we're talking about is turning a semi-automatic handgun that's designed to shoot burst by squeezing the trigger. What we're doing is we're turning that handgun into a fully automatic handgun by just squeezing the trigger. And so therefore, if I had 100 rounds in there, when I squeeze that trigger, that 100 rounds are going to go down range. So, what we're doing is we're turning that handgun into a machine gun, which is not designed to do, and which is illegal on the federal side. So there's nowhere in the United States where you can legally possess this switch or be able to turn a handgun into a machine gun because you're breaking federal law. So what we see is this device that came from, I think they said, China, and you're starting to see now it can be 3D image, and you're starting to see these people making these things at their houses. Now you got some guys that can design it and make it not from a piece of metal, So they're finding ways to turn a handgun into a machine gun, which is totally illegal. So therefore, you will not have studies where you could say, well, this is bad here and it's good here because it's illegal. So you can't have a study on something that's totally illegal. So what we're trying to do is to get the state statute, due to the fact that it takes so long to get a federal indictment to get that person in jail for being in possession of it. What we want to do is to be able to charge him on the state level, put him in jail, indict him on the federal level, move that case to the federal government if the circumstances will allow, because you got to have certain factors and to be able to get a federal indictment. So that's what we're looking for on our state law, and in which our state law is still really kind of dummied down a whole lot, because you can still be in possession of the device. And with us, because on the federal side, if you're in possession of the device with it not being installed, you're still against the law. But on the state level, we're not even looking at it like that.
Well, I guess, and I will admit, I don't own a weapon yet. Even though I've been thinking about it a lot more over the past decade or so. But so I don't know a lot about guns at all. So thanks for the clarification. But I guess what I'm struggling with understanding is, if it's against the law federally, if it's against the federal law, why is it that the legislature hasn't just automatically come on board with this?
And I think when we first started talking about it, we last year, we didn't do a lot of educating the legislature on just what this device has to do. That's the main reason we did a demonstration. I got with the ATF and the media here, went out to the range. We let them see, this is how a weapon shoots now. Pow, pow, pow. Then we put the device weapon up, and we loaded the same amount of rounds and just squeeze the trigger, and you set down 10 rounds within a second, and we let them know just how destructive it was. And the difference was, you got a trained professional firearms expert that's shooting that weapon, and when he's doing the single round bursts, he's tearing the center of the target out. Boom. I mean, all of his rounds there. You put the device on, you ain't even hit the target because you cannot control it, and you can't aim, and you're not going to hit what you're aiming at. when I get off of here, I'm gonna send you the video of me shooting one, and I just want you to see me shooting one with a switch on it and with 29 rounds. I mean, that really opened up my eyes. When I shot it, I was like, my God, this don't need to be on the street. This don't need to be on the street. This is the reason why we got hundreds of people being shot. This is crazy. Who uses this? And then with me, I'm trying to get sight alignment. I'm trying to look and make sure I can aim at the target. And when I started squeezing the trigger, the gun just went straight up. I mean, it just pulled itself up, and it's pushing me back. And they're having to hold me up so that I don't fall back. So can you imagine that being in the hands of some of our young people that think they can shoot a weapon sideways because they saw it on TV? No. And that's what you're seeing. And that's why we got so many, when they say mass destruction, this is all about killing. It ain't about safety. It ain't got crap to do with the Second Amendment. This is all about causing mass destruction.
Well, listen, I'm sure the reason that you were being pushed back is because you're such a small guy and so frail. That's the one thing I've always heard about Derek Cunningham is look how small and frail that guy is. So he's,
Yeah.
the other thing that has been a big talking point and you mentioned it already, is the permitless carry. And there's a lot of arguments back and forth about whether or not this causes that or whatever. And I from a law enforcement perspective, what does permitless carry mean for y'all and your safety on the job?
Permitless carry really changed the way that we do business. Now people are not afraid to brandish. People are not afraid to do anything as it relates to a firearm in the presence of law enforcement. And it's a sad day when you got to put a sign up telling people you can't come in my business. And then the only thing I can charge you with is like a trespass if they come in your business with a weapon on. So what it did is just it changed the way that we do business. It took away our powers of being able to say, hey, if you don't have a permit in your possession of that firearm, you're going to jail. I mean, and that was a tool for us because say you're walking down the street, you and your family, and you got your child with you, and you walk past a guy and he's walking around with a gun in his hand, you're going to call us. You're going to say, hey, man, this don't look right. And then I'm going to say, hey, did he point it at you? No. What, did he make threatening comments to you? No, he just had the gun. Okay, well, that's legal. What I'm saying, what did he do? And that's the interpretation that you're going to be saying is, man, the police wouldn't do nothing. What can we? It's not a law. And that's I guess, Josh, what we can say that perception is what the citizens see. They see what we're not doing our job. We're not doing nothing. Even though that the law has changed. And I listen to people all the time on talk radio. They need to stop them. They need to question them. But if you read the law says he's not in violation. I can't stop you because you got a weapon. I got to have something that triggers us to be able to stop and to ask questions about you, unless I know that you're a known felon or you are doing something that's against the law. But just walking down the street, I can't stop you. And you see them now walking down the road with rifles and shotguns. You've never seen that before, but they know it's legal. They can do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you one more thing here before we let you get back out on the street and catch the bad guys. But I have argued and been called a dirty liberal for it. That all of these things that we're talking about, the refusal to do anything about the bump stocks and the switches and the permitless carry thing, and all of these things have kind of encouraged people to buy weapons, carry weapons, introduce weapons into into altercations which in the past there would have never been there. And it has really furthered this notion that everybody, even David, needs a gun, and so, and which I've been around guns my whole life. And so I'm not scared of them. As I've told many people, I'm scared of idiots with guns. Yeah. That's what I'm scared of. I'm not scared of you, with a gun. I'm of trained people that go out and know what they're doing, and all that. But I am scared of this notion that if everybody just goes buys a gun, we'll all be safer. And so, do you feel like those law or the refusal to put any sort of regulation or to roll back regulations has encouraged this gun culture that's now causing some of the problems?
You're absolutely right. I've already talked with the legislature about us being able to at least have a valid photographic ID if you're going to possess a firearm. Josh, what you just said is about that notion. We got to realize the number of people now, when you start talking about that we encounter on the street, my guys and girls stop on the side of the road, or we have an encounter, we get a weapon, but we got to figure out who they are. Because people don't tell, oh, I'm sorry, the police stopped you, we're going to tell the truth. My name is Josh Moon, and I know your date of birth, and I know all about you, and that's who I'm going to be at the time of that stop. But you don't have to have any kind of ID on you to be able to clarify or to let that officer know that the name I'm giving is you, but you got a weapon. And that's that. And all I ask for is a simple: can we make sure they have a valid photographic ID, so that we will know that the name they're giving us is the person who they are, and they have a right and a privilege to carry that weapon. That's all we want to know. The best part about a permit, when they had the permit, if I stop you and you give me your permit, guess what? I know you had a background check, and I feel good. I know that you got that weapon and you're carrying it the right way because you got a permit. Yeah. But if I stop you now, you ain't got a permit. I don't know what your background is. I don't know if you're mental. I don't know if you're a ex-felon. I don't know any of that. And then I got to assume who you are because you don't have ID on you. So, they just put law enforcement in a catch-22, but at the same time, we're still getting these calls for services, but we still got to deal with the hot ticket button, which is everybody has a firearm, everybody has a gun, and every time you go someplace, all you get is, I heard shots over here, I got shots being fired over here, I heard a machine gun over there, and knock on wood, our little Max task force we got, we have been really doing some good things, and that task force has really helped us on a lot of situations, and they recovered a lot of machine gun devices on weapons since they've been out there. And you're looking at 39 days of an existence with this task force, and being able to have over 1,300 vehicles stopped, the number of stolen vehicles recovered, the number of handguns taken off the street. That speaks volumes, because now at least they're proactively out here stopping and checking. But those that violate, you look at the consequences. We're removing them from the street, but we got charges for them. And I think without being able to do the stops and being able to discover some of the stuff that we're discovering, stolen vehicles and things of this nature, but it slows down on the number of people, the robberies of the businesses and things of this nature. If you work at a convenience store at night, somebody come in with a gun, they ain't got to say, stick them up. You come in my store by myself, you got a gun, I would just go ahead and open up the cash register and put the money in. It's all about me going home. It ain't about all that stuff. And like I said, I guess it's the perception that we're casting by allowing people to walk around here and open carry and things of this nature. It's just a bad feeling when you got a young 16, 17-year-old working at a convenience store or at a restaurant and somebody comes in with a gun on their side.
Yeah, yeah, no, and you know, and people talk about well, they're they're down in numbers on the police force, and that the deputies and stuff, and I wonder why. I wonder why that could be, right? When you're out on the streets with it with that mess. Yeah, yeah, all the time. Hey, Sheriff, thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with us.
No, anytime y'all need me, I'm here.
Yeah,
All
thank
right.
you, Sheriff. We appreciate
Yeah,
you.
he's the best, man. That's Sheriff Derek Cunningham. And listen, wipe those warrants out for me if you don't mind.
There are too many. I'm sure there are too many.
Yeah.
Probably going back too far.
Yeah, right. There's statute of limitations on most of those. Yeah, so all right. That's Sheriff Derek Cunningham. We're going to slide out of here. We'll come back in just a minute to wrap this thing. Or I'm sorry, to wrap this thing up. This is Alabama Politics This Week. Back in a minute. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. Josh Moon, David Person. Thanks to Sheriff Derek Cunningham for spending some time. Thanks to the good folks at Wind Creek for sponsoring this bad boy, the folks at SPLC and all the others that help out, and for Don finishing up his, I guess he's breaking leaves this week. I don't know what he's doing. Maybe he's still mowing, I guess. Or the rain may be causing him some problems. I don't know. Maybe he's doing some drainage work. First of all, need to congratulate before we wrap up with the right wing nut stuff. We need to congratulate Michelle Watkins for her win up in Huntsville for City Council. District 1 becomes the first Black woman to hold a seat on the City Council. That's pretty impressive.
In the history of the city, a city that was founded in the 1800s, I think, 1800s.
Yeah.
If not earlier. Let's be clear about that. The first Black woman ever. That's crazy. And at the same time, congratulations, as you said, to Michelle. I know Michelle. She is an impressive person, and I think she's going to represent our district, because I live in her district. She represent our district well. The one thing that will probably be interesting to watch is how she decides to represent us, because she has had some let's say some disagreements with the Huntsville establishment from time to time. And
yes, she has.
I think she'll have to walk a fine line between continuing to advocate vociferously for our district, which she does extremely well, and also, continuing to figure out how to navigate the politics and in such a way that she gets things done, and is able to broker deals and so forth. But I have the fullest confidence that she'll be able to pull that off.
Yeah, I think this shifts power away from the mayor's office. I think they're going to have to try to find some allies and work with some allies on different things.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good thing. I think that forces some folks to go out and consider. Consider some issues that they may not have been forced to consider in the past. Consider some people they may not have been forced to consider in the past, and whenever you do that, I think you learn a little bit more about some problems within your city that you didn't necessarily know existed. And so I think that'll be a good thing.
Yeah, and I also would add this, Josh. I think it forces some of the established politicians and decision makers, influencers, visible and invisible in our city, to start to reconsider how they do business, because I think they felt, the word is, and I don't know, I cannot verify this, but I can tell you that I've heard more than once that that there was a concerted effort by the establishment in our city to try to make sure that Michelle did not win. And
well, yeah, those ads didn't come from the air, those hit pieces and mailers and things.
You got those sorts of things, and then you also have the very presence in the race of in the general election of my friend Reggie McKenzie. Great guy. Reggie's a great guy. Nothing bad to say about Reggie per se, but many believe that, well, I shouldn't say many, I'll say some believe, some people with influence have said that Reggie was recruited into that race specifically to try to siphon off votes from Michelle and to try to keep her from being elected. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I do know that he was in the race, and I do know that he endorsed Devin Keith in the runoff. So, whatever that's worth, people can take that for whatever it's worth. But if that was indeed, old school, old boy politics, backroom, smoke-filled room politics, then they need to wake up, open the doors, let some of that cigar smoke out, and realize that it's a new day.
Yeah, I think they could have. I think they could have gone a different way there. I think that they could have, tried to embrace Michelle Watkins a little more, and I think they could have mended some fences on that side. I think that that was the time to do it when she needed the help. And the race was in question. They could have backed her, I think, and I think it could have gone a long way towards mending those fences. Now you've got not only have you done it, you've done it in a way that's created some bad blood. With those ads that it really kind of tore down the school system. In addition to attacking her. By talking about the property values and whatnot because of the school system. And it was really kind of, I don't know who was, I'll say this, I don't know who was running opposition research for them, but they needed to hire somebody else because, that was some really thin stuff they were working with there. But.
And it disparages the community. I think that's what's part of what's dumb about that whole approach. The very people that you supposedly are trying to convince to get your argument, you're disparaging them in the process. Yeah. You're disparaging us in the process.
Exactly. And if you'd had a better firm working for you, they would have laid that out for you. But not that I know anything about that. And so, it's I just think that it's it was a poor play, and they'll get it worked out, they'll get it figured out. There's a lot of money that's on the table, and I think that's some of the development stuff. I think that's what was at stake in that, and I think some people were worried about some things getting through without votes on the council, and that's understandable. I understand there's some financial hardships that could be around the corner if certain things don't go the right direction, and so we'll see how that ends up.
That's not Michelle Watkins' fault, though.
No, absolutely, it's not. No, that's what I'm saying.
And it's not the fault of the people of District 1. If anything, it's the fault of developers and those who are enabling developers. And I'm not going to call any names, but I think the obvious is obvious. Who are overdeveloping the city with all of these apartments and other things, because at some point, as the late Malcolm X once said before he became El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, the chickens are coming home to roost. Yeah, and at some point, that's what's going to happen.
Absolutely, and the fear from her was that she was going to take a look at some of this stuff and say, "Hey, wait a minute, we don't have nearly the development in District 1 that we should."
There's that too.
So I'm not voting for a continuation of this stuff over here in these areas that have already been, a focal point for years now. And instead, I want these things to come to our district. And so I think that was a big fear and will remain so. I'm sure it's a big fear right now downtown as they have their I get Monday morning quarterbacking discussions of what happened last night. And so, but honestly, that was not an upset. Devin Keith did this to himself. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a whole episode. That's a whole segment. What Devin Keith has done, not just, and I'm not just talking about the, the crimes of which he was convicted or pled guilty to, but I'm also talking about just the way he conducted himself as a public servant. I heard many complaints through the years about Devin not being responsive to voters, not returning phone calls, not meeting appointments. And I witnessed some of that, a small little bit of it, but just enough to say, oh, that's what they were talking about. So, there's that. But it's going to be interesting to see. I'm going to be down at City Hall. We're recording this on Wednesday, and I'm going to be down at City Hall later today for a retirement celebration for my very close friend Kenny Anderson, who's the DEI director for the city of Huntsville, and I'll be very interested to see what the mood is down there today.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, won't it? Yeah, it'd be a lot of tears down there. So our let's get into our right wing nut, because it's a whole piece itself. Because we're gonna do Caroline Dobson, or as my friend Bill Britt will say, Caroline Dobbs, because he for some reason or another can never get her name right. I have no idea. He's not even trying to disparage her in any way.
Oh, okay. I was trying to figure out what does that mean. Okay,
nothing. He just can't remember her name ever. Caroline Dobbs. It's something. So and before we get into this, there's a story in the Griot website, written by Michael Harriot, who's a fairly well known a journalist, and writes does a really great job on pieces like this, and he kind of explores the background of both Dobson and her opponent in the 2nd Congressional District race, Shamari Figures, not I almost said Michael Figures, Shamari Figures, and their families and where they came from, and obviously. Neither of them are responsible for what their families, their ancestors did. Okay. Shamari Figures doesn't automatically get credit for what his ancestors did, if those are good things. And Caroline Dobson does not automatically get blame for any bad things her ancestors did. However, there are some things, and this is the reason she is a right-wing nut, of how they are handled. Yeah. And how that history is handled, and the way those folks conduct themselves, and the way they portray that history. And that is why she is our right-wing nut, is because she has decided to take her family history, whitewash it, as it were, and make it seem as though she is just a hard-working little daughter of this 5th generation cattle farm that, just was built through sweat, tears, and hard labor by her folks. And as Harriet points out in his piece, that family wealth kind of came from a different place, and started in North Carolina with one of her ancestors. She is a Hardy, going back. Her maiden name is Hardy, and started back in North Carolina with a gigantic plantation in which they employed 137 slaves. 137 slaves, which put him in the 0.1% of slave owners.
No, you said employed. I think.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean. Enslaved people. Yeah. And then the portion of her family left from there because there was a bit of a land grab going on in Alabama, and you think, well, why would there be such a land grab taking place in Alabama? Why was all this land suddenly available in South Alabama, Monroe County? Where would this land have come from? And of course, it came from the ancestors of the folks who sponsored this program, the Creek Nation and the Muskogees, which were being forced off of their land and forced, down the Trail of Tears. Eventually, there were a lot of wars and battles and things that went on between the United States government, Andrew Jackson, and his treatment of Native Americans, and so they were given squatters' rights at one point, and then they were pushed out. And that they were, through Andrew Jackson's land deal that he had, they were given the opportunity to buy an acre of land for $1.25 an acre. And they bought a bunch of it. And that's where the farm, or the cattle farm, eventually came from. And then they used the sharecroppers program to further that. And were really cheats at that as well, and built that farm off the back of essentially slave labor, and did it for decades. And then we all of a sudden have one of the wealthiest families in Alabama, and the hardworking little country girl that's loaned herself about $5 million to do this campaign from her family's wealth, doesn't want to talk about CRT in schools anymore. It doesn't want to talk about these history, and does not care about this white privilege nonsense.
Yeah, so that's this whole thing about the legacy wealth of white people is a conversation that many of us in the Black community, or in, I'll say, the liberal academy, have been discussing for decades. I mean, we're not ignorant of this. Dr. King even talked about some of this in some of his works and writings, going back 60 years ago. We're not fools. We understand that all of this, hard work and grit and bootstraps, it's all bull crap. Excuse my language, Pastor, if you're listening. It's foolishness. It's just not true. It's this country was built on the backs of hardworking people, but they were hardworking people who had no choice. They were hardworking people who had their land stolen from them. Indigenous people and Black people also suffered land theft. Leon Litwack, in his book Trouble in Mind, talks about that quite extensively. He also talks about convict leasing, where Black men were imprisoned or put to or sent to jail for such horrific crimes as spitting on the sidewalk, so that they could then be forced to work and leased out to work by law enforcement to private companies. I mean, this is the kind of thing, when you start talking about the hard work of white families through the centuries in this country, that was the hard work that was being done. The hard work was disenfranchising other people. Now, I'm not saying that that's every white family story, but I am saying that that is a predominant story. It absolutely defines what this country was and what helped this country to become what it is today. And anybody that denies that is either ignorant or delusional, because the facts are there. Now, again, I'm not saying that's everybody's story. There are some people, some white families and some white people who did things honestly and with integrity and without those sorts of things. But that's not what defined this nation by any stretch of the imagination.
No, absolutely not. And I want to say too, I'm not criticizing Caroline Dobson for what took place, and by all accounts, she has lived an honorable enough life. I don't know personally what she does or what she believes or how she treats, people when the cameras aren't rolling or things like that. But there's been no evidence to suggest that she has been awful to anybody or that she's a racist or anything else. I do think that there are some things that she has said that discounts the history of her family, the history of this state, the history that has neglected so many different people. Now that I think there has been a real choosing of ignorance in that regard, and that's the reason why we have been critical of her, not because her great 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 grandfather did some really bad things or participated in some really bad things, but it's the ignoring of that history and painting it as this, we brought ourselves up by our bootstraps, sort of, American success story, when it is, you're right, it is an American success story. The problem is we just don't like to tell the ugly parts of that success a lot of times. And not only that, we don't like to then say, well, this is what was happening over here. Here's what were happening to these other folks over here, the Figures family, and what was taking place in their lives, and what kept them from obtaining the same wealth, the same prosperity as the Dobson family, because our husband's family was also involved in slave business itself out in Texas, but also the Hardy family that she was a direct descendant of, and that lack of acknowledgement of that is what really, I think, causes a lot of problems. And to me, it paints this picture of that unfairly grants this image of these white people as these conscientious hard workers that just do things the right way, and then they've had success because of it. And no, man,
yeah.
You didn't have success. You cheated. Cheated, and you're reaping the benefits of that generations later.
Yeah, and I think as we often say, one of the things that's most problematic, or the thing that is often more problematic than the crime, the original crime, is the cover-up of the crime. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the cover-up of the crime, the cover-up of the evil, the whitewashing of the history. She can't do anything about what her ancestors did. She can't change the past. But what she can do is tell a truthful story and acknowledge the damage. And what she can do is educate herself on the impact that damage has on things today. And that's where a lot of us as Black people get angry. We get angry because, white society often tries to depict these things as separate and unrelated, as though they happen in a vacuum. Like there's no connection at all between the impoverishment disproportionately of Black people and what happened during Jim Crow and what happened during slavery, or the impoverishment of many indigenous people and what happened with the Trail of Tears and the theft of land originally, and just the whole invasion of the indigenous nations. So we gotta get real about this. We want transparency, we want accountability, and yes, we want corrective action. Whether that comes in the form of affirmative action, whether that comes in other forms. I mean, those things can be negotiated and should be negotiated. They should be legislated. They should be codified. They should be instituted, whether as corporate policies or corporate practices. But to suggest that there absolutely is no accountability by the United States of America or the state of Alabama for the state of poor indigenous people, poor Black people, anybody else that has been historically disenfranchised by the institutions of America and the institution of the state of Alabama, is just utterly ridiculous, and it's immoral. It's not logical,
Yeah,
And we know this. Common sense tells us this.
Sure. And you know, to me, the most disingenuous part of the whole thing is well, you're just, when you bring up these old stories, you're just teaching people to hate each other. You know, they're no, that's not true. You're taking some accountability in this and explaining the proper sequence of things. And whenever you tell people the truth of what happened, then you're letting them know there are explanations for these things, and it's not simply that there are a bunch of people impoverished because of the color of their skin, which is the most absurd thing ever. But there's a history here that goes into this poverty, and there's an explanation for it. There's a logical, reasonable explanation for it, and you're denying the people the chance to learn about this and to then view folks differently than what they ordinarily would. And also, you're propping up these phony success stories of people that were supposedly these hard workers that just, these great ingenious people that came along and did these fantastic things because they were so much smarter and more hardworking than these other people, when in fact they had advantages that all these other folks did not have, and they used those people to build their wealth and to build a legacy. And that is the story that should be told, so people better understand how they got there and why you shouldn't be making commercials leaning on this past history as though y'all were, just better than everybody else, when in fact there was the advantages that gave you a leg up. And that's going to be a huge problem for you when people do figure it out. And it should be a huge problem for you now that you've tried to cover it up for so long. And that's the reason why you're the right wing nut. So, it's life. All right, let's get out of here.
All right.
We've done enough, I think. I think we've explained enough. We've done enough. Until next week, y'all be safe.